All right, welcome everybody. I'm gonna turn this over to John so that he can take roll call and we can get the meeting going. I want to start with the second slide. There we go.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is John Beeling. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Policy and Planning here at MassDEP. I'll be serving as the chair of the Executive Producer Responsibility Commission. Oh, and stealing my thunder is the actual commission. Commissioner Hyde. So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'll turn it over to you for opening and then I'll get to it. Okay.
Thank you all for joining us. Bonnie Heifel, I'm the Commissioner of MassDEP. We are very excited about this commission. I'm late because I wandered in accidentally to municipal recyclers meeting upstairs. I was like, I know these recycling people, this must be the meeting, not the meeting. And even in that 2 minutes upstairs, someone said, oh, the EPR commission, we're so excited about this. So are we. I think having all of these sort of diverse perspectives at the table will really make this a productive commission. In my 90 seconds upstairs, someone said, I heard that commission was a delay tactic, so you don't actually have to do anything on any of this. And I said, well, if it's a delay tactic, it's not one by MassDEP. Certainly, as you know, we're directed to convene this commission and are really excited and have a short list of things that we're hoping you all can focus on and help us really develop some ideas around in the short term. So John will lay out for you, some of the priorities that we've had at DEP. Certainly hope that you come with your own priorities so we can meld those into one list. But really hoping to sequence things so that, we're not waiting until the end of this commission, until the final report to get moving on things. But rather can sort of tackle product categories as we go and see if we can get some recommendations, even attached to moving vehicles up to the legislature. So that's sort of how we have envisioned the work of this commission proceeding, and just really grateful for all of you coming together, making time. I'm guessing on a Monday morning, no one was sitting around twiddling their thumbs with nothing else to do. So thank you for carving out the time to be here and put your heads together. We saw some great success at the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs with the Clean Siting Commission, which was sort of a similarly sized, similarly different perspectives on shared issues of focus type of outfit. It led to some really interesting discussions. I was a lawyer in my previous job for many years, and so I'm always one for like a hearty debate. And I think that commission was a good example of folks rolling up their sleeves and engaging in a way that was, not just an echo chamber, not all coming to the issue with the same views on it, but really ending up with some concrete, positive set of recommendations out of that work because people really were willing to have those honest conversations respectfully and disagree, but kind of come to a middle ground on some of the tougher issues. So hoping the work here can proceed similarly. Have we done introductions?
No.
Yeah? Okay.
That's where we're at.
Be good to just kind of go around the room, I think, and hear from folks just your name, your organization, and if you have any, preliminary views on how this can proceed, I would invite you to share those as well. Sorry.
I'm gonna pass for now.
Okay.
I'm a consultant.
Yeah, I think I'm actually I'm gonna call.
You want to do this more officially?
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna call her to make sure we have a
Wow,
quorum.
very organized.
Yeah, today, a lot of today is to kind of set up the structure of the commission. We're gonna talk a bit about substance, but a lot of it's just to get us off the ground, make sure we're set up in a way that everyone understands. So without further ado, I'm just gonna call your name. If you're here, please say present. Okay, I'm here. Senator Barrett.
Present.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Yes,
We can.
thank you, thank you. Sharon Byrne Kishida.
Present.
Leanne Cole.
I'll be instead. So Max Hayworth, Community Action Works, present.
Thank you. Janet Dominance.
Present.
Lou Dubuque. Present. Magda Garnkars.
Present.
Hey, did I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Garn Cars. Close.
Thank you. I tried. Sarah Kalish.
Present.
Delene Lapointe.
Present.
David Melly. Connor O'Shaughnessy.
Present.
Andrew Potter.
Present.
My neighbor. Catherine I'm gonna say ready. Okay. Bill Rennie, present. Neil Ryan,
Present.
Juanita Trabert,
Present.
Tracy Triplett,
Present.
Abby Webb.
Present.
I'm just gonna,
Michael Bay,
Yeah.
Representative Day.
oh, Representative Day, sorry. Oh, I missed you. Big oversight, sorry about that. Down the bottom, you'll see there's a reference. We still are seeking to fill 2 vacancies. These are, so the composition of the commission was set up by the legislature. These are all required, boxes that we need to fill on the commission. And we've got a lot of folks, but we have been unable thus far to fill 2 statewide environmental justice organization vacancies. We reached out to a number of folks. I gotta imagine these days it's pretty hectic. So I can understand how folks, perhaps are a little wary of devoting their time to this commission, but if anybody here or anybody online knows of organizations that might be interested in participating in this commission, please have them reach out to us. It seems a little bit, usually environmental justice issues are kind of neighborhood issues, right? It's whether they're putting a factory or something in your neighborhood, that's kind of how it naturally arises. There's a couple ways that this work could impact environmental justice. There's a couple of obvious ones. Lithium-ion batteries are known causes of fires. They're often cited in EJ communities, transfer stations, things of that nature are often cited in EJ communities. So that's one reason it'd be good to have someone give us that perspective. Mattresses disproportionately affect EJ communities. So it's a pitch. If folks are interested, please reach out and we'll seat you on the committee. Okay, next slide, please. I want to take this opportunity to introduce some of our staff and some of the folks who are going to be helping us. First is Greg Cooper, who's the director of our hazardous and solid waste division. John Fisher, he's a deputy director. He's in charge of solid waste here in Commonwealth. Courtney Rainey, who's deputy chief of staff, director of government affairs. We're going to be doing a lot of interfacing with the legislature, so it's really important that Courtney is involved. A lot of our work here is going to be working with the legislature. They set it up. They have the power to pass these laws, so we're going to be communicating with them. Jennifer Haw, who's the vice president of planning for Greener U. Craig Altimos, who's the director of programs for Greener U. And Madeline Rawson, who's a project manager for Greener U.
Don't know that she is.
So that's our team.
Oh, she is.
Okay, so these are the folks that you should feel free to communicate. You can also communicate directly with me. We'll talk about ground rules for forums and communications, all that's gonna come up. So this is a commission that's subject to public meeting laws, subject to certain restrictions in terms of how we communicate the work that we do. But we're gonna work our way through kind of the structural piece of this before we get to the more meaty part of this. Next slide, please. I gotta turn this one over.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, so just to start, the goals for today's meeting are we're going to confirm logistics for all EPR meetings moving forward. We're going to do some rules of engagement, so just pulling from bylaws and guidelines. To do that, we're going to adopt those bylaws and ground rules and a remote meeting policy, although that one I think has some caveats to it. And then we're going to share some EPR basics. We have a presenter today, Scott Cassell, from the Product Stewardship Institute, PSI. So he's going to run through his slides on that topic, and then we'll sort of give you a roadmap to future meetings and have you discuss what we think we should tackle in the time period that we have. So the agenda is on the right. It's basically introductions, review of global agenda, brief presentation on the climate law and the EPR Commission's charge. Adoption of policies, we'll do the presentation I mentioned, we'll have actually 2 presentations sort of back to back. Then we're gonna have a discussion and questions, topics for consideration that we should be covering, as well as review of the proposed meeting roadmap and next steps in adjournment. Any questions, anything that we should include that I completely spaced? Okay, perfect. Then we move on to the next slide.
I'm gonna let you all get to work. Thank you all again.
Thank you,
Looking forward to the recommendations. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for dropping by.
Of course.
This is back with me, right?
Yes.
All right, so who are we? I'm just gonna call it EPR commission because the full title's kind of twisted, so EPR is gonna be the word. So this was set up by section 108 of chapter 239 of the Acts of 2024, which is a much broader climate bill. This is a piece of that bill that set up, which is our charge, which is to recommend to the general court extended producer responsibility policies for the Commonwealth. I think everyone knows what EPR is, but we're gonna go into much further detail on that as we move along. So the specific charge is to look at these particular waste streams: paint, mattresses, electronics, lithium ion batteries, plastics, and packaging. So those are the ones we're gonna tackle. We'll figure out kind of order that will proceed as we move along, but I think it's written in a way that the first two especially, there's already established programs. They're not, there's a lot of references we can look at for paint and mattresses in other states. These are pretty well-established processes and programs. I'll mention that there are bills pending, I think, for pretty much all of these categories. So we won't need to actually come up with language necessarily. We might just work with the legislature and say, look, we think this bill should go forward, make recommendations. That's our job, make recommendations. We're not here to write legislation. We're here to make recommendations to the legislature to move forward on some of these products. The other thing we'll look at is the pro structures for collection, processing, and financial responsibility. We'll have to look at cost impact, right? That's always the counterbalance with pretty much any environmental regulation. You gotta take a look at what the costs are and figure out how you're gonna deal with that. Waste reduction of product and packaging incentives, and then impacts of waste generation and contamination reduction. So this last piece says issue initial recommendations and related findings by January 15, 2026. The commissioner mentioned, like, and I'm also a lawyer and I've been involved with public, policy for a long time. It is true that sometimes when people want to make something go away, they study it to death, right? It's not what we're gonna do here, right? What I look at there, that says, that's our deadline. That doesn't mean we can't make recommendations prior to that, right? So I think if this works well, we'll look at a product, we'll look at what we think is the best approach, and we'll issue a recommendation. We'll have our final initial recommendations and related findings will be by January 2026. But that doesn't mean we have to wait until then to make recommendations. That's my interpretation, that we can move forward, maybe pick off some things that are better, well-established. And then, there's gotta be some things that do require a fair amount of work. There's some that really don't require a whole lot of work. We're always gonna talk about it. We don't want to hear everyone's perspectives, but there's things that are much more established, kind of nationally, and so even regionally, there's a lot of these products that are being dealt with. So we have a pretty good sense of where we should go. And then the other ones, I think, will take more time. So that's my, vision of this commission as chair. Next, please. So you want me to do the motions?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I am the chairman. All right, I think everybody should have received the EPR commission bylaw. If anyone did not receive them, please let us know now. Should have gone via email, okay? So I'm gonna move to adopt the EPR commission bylaws.
I think you need to ask someone to make a motion.
Yes. Can you make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you very much.
And then discussion.
And then we have discussion.
Well, you need a motion, then a
Then we need
second, and then a
second.
discussion.
We're getting there.
Okay, great.
I will second
We
that.
have a second. Then we have discussion. Anyone want to discuss the bylaws?
I just want clarity, if I could, is that the ground rules document that was sent to press?
Bylaws.
Bylaws document.
That's all the discussion.
Yeah.
If anyone,
All in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
Do we have?
Indicate by saying aye.
Sure. Get people
Any-
online too.
Yep.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the EPR commission bylaws are passed. The second, document we need to approve are the guidelines. The representative had indicated, those are out. Anyone not received the guidelines? Okay.
Motion to approve the guidelines.
I will second that.
Any discussion? Yes.
Yeah, just a question on this. Is this something put together for this commission, or is this something standard fare from the administration?
This is.
This is for the commission.
This is specific to the commission.
It just seemed that some of the pieces here seem a little, I guess, overly strict. We're gonna be having a discussion about this stuff.
Now's the time.
Yeah, so I think some of these are, we're all adults, we're all professionals here. We want to engage in the discussion on this stuff. So when you've got strict pieces saying you're not being able to bring discussions back to a previous topic, actively seeking agreement wherever possible, 3 minutes on an agenda, it might, I mean, from my perspective, the chair has the discretion on controlling discussion. Right. But when we're agreeing on rules that say you can't go back to a previous topic, that seems to be a bit strict to me.
Think it did mention chair could, say, yeah, no. Well, that part of it says the chair has the, this is how we want to operate, 3 minutes, but the chair has the right to say extend. Right?
Yeah, on the time limit, sure. I'm just concerned that we want to go back to a previous topic. I don't see the discretion in there.
Okay,
So we could strike that if the commission feels that we should strike. So these are the provision that we shouldn't go back to a previous topic, because that was mostly concerned. Okay, the 3 minutes is obviously something within discretion, right? It's a guide.
Yeah.
So we're trying to, we're gonna go through a lot of things, we've got a lot of people, so we're trying to keep it somewhat structured. But if, does anyone else share the representative's concern about inability to go back to a previous topic? Anyone want to share their thoughts on that?
This is Senator Barrett remotely, if I might be heard. Yeah, I do share Representative Day's reservation. I did take part in the Commission on Siting and Permitting, and I took part on, I do take part in the EVIC working group. I took part in the Clean Transmission working group, took part in the special review of MassSave and GSEP. And I don't recall the 3 minute limit for any of those working groups or commissions. I could be wrong, but I don't recall them ever being enforced or invoked.
Suppose our options are to vote on whether to retain, there's two provisions. We'll start with the 3 minute provision. I'm not sure how procedurally this follows. Do I need a motion?
well, yeah, I think we'd have to take,
I think you need new language.
Yeah, we have to, I think, take it back and bring it back to the members.
So let's.
Should we table this?
Do that. We'll just table this and we'll bring it back to the next hearing. We'll take those, any other concerns other than those raised by Representative Day and Senator? Okay, so we'll take it back, we'll bring it, we'll send you out another copy, and then we'll vote on whether or not to adopt it as amended. Okay, remote participation policy. Everybody should have that. Anyone not received the remote participation policy. So as folks probably know, the open meeting law was with the ability to participate remotely was extended. When we sent out the notice at that point in time, it hadn't been extended, so out of caution, we decided the first meeting for the commission should be in person. Now we do have flexibility. We could hold these meetings hybrid. We could hold them completely remote. And not inclined to have them completely in person. So to me, the real question is, I need a motion to whether we adopt the remote participation policy. So. That's a second.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
So you're saying it would be hybrid? Like, in other words, we're not all remote, but there'd be the option to be remote, is that what you're saying?
Well, I think we have a decision we can make. We can make this all remote if we want, under the law these days. We could also have it hybrid. I think those are really our two options. So if anybody feels strong that this should be all remote, we should so indicate. Those comfortable with having a hybrid meetings like this?
Would you mind flipping your name card around?
Well, I'll speak up and say, I'll be brave. I'd like to have it all remote, frankly. But because there's as good as your technology is, there's always a drawback to being remote when there are people in the room, because there's eye contact, there's all kinds of that kind of thing. So, I mean, frankly, living hard on the New York border in the west, I would be inclined to drive to come to a meeting if it was hybrid, just because there's an inherent split between a room and remote.
I'm coming from upstate New York, just outside Albany, and I think it's best to be in person. Have everyone engaging in public.
Against Senator Barrett here, and I should have prefaced my previous remarks by thanking DEP and thanking everyone for taking part in this commission and work group. I'm delighted to see everyone here. The Senate operates in a hybrid fashion. We too have members, of course, in the Berkshires and on the borders of various other states. Sometimes legislators can make it in. I think I take the point that in person is better in terms of the participants' personal experience, but flexibility is also important, and a rigid rule that essentially does away with remote participation, would move us back a good 5 or 6 years in terms of our senses of what's appropriate. Here's my political experience. We get better participation in hybrid than in person. It is true that you can insist on in person, but then attendance falls off because of necessity. People need some flexibility in their schedule and things come up. So the trade-off here is between the somewhat higher quality of in-person and the higher participation of hybrid. If that's the choice, and it has tended, I think, to be proven by experience that it is, I prefer higher participation for all involved.
Just to clarify, I meant hybrid. I wanted people in person, and then if you can't make it, you can be online. Yeah, right.
The policy, it permits remote participation, but when you so choose, it just sets up a structure. So you just gotta notify the commission that you're gonna be remote that day.
Right.
So, I do share, I've been on that end of things where you're remote and everybody else is in person, that does present challenges. But I think I'm hearing the consensus is hybrid. So we want to, I lost track of where we are in the process. If we move, we have moved, correct, at this point?
We're in discussion.
Okay, we're in discussion. So, I think we're at the point where we need to vote. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Remote participation policy has been adopted by the commission. Sorry. Okay, next slide.
All right. So just a few rules of engagement here for all of you who are participating. Open meeting law prohibits deliberation outside of policy meetings, publicly held meetings. So I'm gonna ask my legal colleagues to maybe clarify what that means a little bit. Julie?
Hi, Julie McNeil, I'm counsel to the solid waste program here at DEP. Basically, no deliberations just means discussion amongst members. It has to be a quorum, but we need to be careful about that because things can lead to a quorum, even if you're just sending out an email to folks and nobody responds. That could be considered deliberation. So everybody just have to be very, very careful about, when they're talking about anything to do with this commission amongst each other. You can speak to members can speak to other members, but you just have to be very careful about not reaching that quorum. Right now, we're at 19 members. So 10 is a quorum. A quorum is a simple majority. So yeah, I'm gonna be seeking more guidance about this too, so there could be more coming out in future meetings, but just to be careful about any communications and it's all in the materials that everyone's gonna be, I think you're gonna be getting to that subject, right?
Yeah.
So Greg will be going over that certification. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Julia. Sorry for the
It's okay.
cold call.
Yeah, just to add on the open meeting part, so, you were provided in your packet, the open meeting law guidance. And there's also a certification that needs to be accepted from us within 10 days of your appointment. I'm kind of counting this as your appointment. You know, we're all here for the first time, but we would really like to gather those certificates. We need to have them. I've received some already by email. But if you want to try and, you know, we can go and make sure we have some copies here if you'd like to sign them today. But otherwise, let's just try to make a real hard commitment to get those into me real quickly, okay?
Thank you.
And to read all the things that the certification certifies that you have read.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect, okay, and then the rest of this is just sort of common sense stuff, but we'll read it anyway. Members should do their best to attend EPR commission meetings, to be on time and to be prompt in returning for breaks. I don't think we've built in any breaks today, sorry about that. Maybe in the future we will. If you'd like to speak during the meeting, what you should do is take your name card and flip it upward. And I will call on you, or I'll make sure that, like, okay, John, Bill, then Tracy. So we have an order of that.
And
Sorry,
if you're remote,
yes, if you're remote, please raise your hand. You're electronically and keep it up so that I can see it and we'll call on you. Chat on Zoom is prohibited, so we've actually turned that feature off for today's meeting. Please be succinct in your statements. There are some of us who are more introverted than others, and some of us have a lot more to say. But if you can just be succinct, that would be really helpful. I think participation is important in making sure that everyone has had an opportunity to voice their views. That's why you're here. So let's all have a stance that we're here to learn from each other and get everybody's perspectives. So the last one is in the spirit of how difficult it is to do hybrid meetings. When you're here in person and there's like banter and laughter and, you know, like one-on-one conversations, that's very difficult for those who are participating remotely. So please try to remember that. And we will keep the meeting as like focus on the owl as much as possible. So any questions or anything else you want to add to that? All good? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, we have John.
Hi.
Oh, hi, sure, just quick.
David Melly, Legislative Director with the Environmental League of Massachusetts.
And I don't think you introduced yourself unless I
Well,
missed it.
sort of. I was introduced. I'm Jen Hauk. I'm the Vice President of Planning at Greener Helping Facility.
John?
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I'll do it for you.
Great. All right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to give some very short background here on solid waste management in Massachusetts. This may be familiar to some of you, but we want to make sure everyone has this big picture of what we're looking at and thinking about with solid waste management in Massachusetts. So MassDEP has what we call a solid waste master plan that provides our program and policy framework for how we're working to manage solid waste in Massachusetts. And within that solid waste master plan, we have what we feel are aggressive disposal reduction goals. So there is a pair of tonnage-based goals, the first of which is to reduce our disposal by 1.7 million tons by 2030. The second of which is to reduce disposal by 5 million tons by 2050. And those are both off of 2018 baseline disposal of about 5.7 million tons. First one's a 30% reduction, second one's a 90% reduction. We also have a goal that goes along with that to reduce the toxicity of our solid waste stream through better managing and reducing hazardous household products, which plays into some of our discussions within this commission as well. When we look at our solid waste management data, we're very concerned about limited solid waste management capacity in Massachusetts and throughout the Northeast United States. Our current, well, not current, but as of 2023 disposal data, which is most recent we have at the moment, we disposed of 6.2 million tons of trash, so an uptick from our 2018 baseline. That's about 4.7 million tons of what we call municipal solid waste. So that's our regular trash from households and businesses. We speak about that as MSW, municipal solid waste, but it's not just municipal, it's all our trash from households and businesses, except for what we call non-municipal solid waste, which is primarily construction and demolition materials. So when we look at that 6.2 million tons, about 4.7 million tons municipal solid waste, about 1.5 million tons non-municipal solid waste. The municipal solid waste, the largest portion of that is disposed in-state waste to energy facilities. So about 3 million tons of that. About 400,000 tons in-state landfills, that has been reduced over the years. And then on a net basis, 1.3 million tons going to disposal facilities in other states for disposal. So waste flows across state borders routinely. So we export more than that to other states for disposal, and more trash in turn comes in to Massachusetts from entities in those other states. On a net basis, that comes out to 1.3 million tons going out of Massachusetts. And that's not MassDEP or the state who determines that, that's just the solid waste management infrastructure and companies that run that infrastructure. Non-municipal solid waste is a little bit different. Almost all of our non-municipal solid waste disposal, again, construction and demolition materials, is disposed of out of state on a net basis. That comes out to about 1.4 million tons a year. So I'll return to this in a moment, but you can see we have a strained management capacity for solid waste in Massachusetts, and this extends throughout the Northeast. Okay, so this gives our trend from 2018, if you recall, our baseline and our 2030 solid waste master plan. And what this chart is basically doing is comparing our disposal, so that's the second, third, fourth rows in this table, with the top row, which is our gross domestic product by state. So the economic indicator that we're looking at for statewide economic trends. So, and this disposal, for now, I'm just going to focus on the top row here. All this information will be shared and available later, so don't get too caught up in all the numbers here. But what we're seeing, and what we've always seen historically, is a trend for solid waste generation to rise or fall in line with the economy. So when the economy is growing, waste generation tends to rise, consumption rises, purchases rise, and the resulting disposal rises. When the economy drops, the opposite tends to hold true. So what we've seen since 2018 is a significant growth in the state economy. It's up about a third, 32%. We've also seen an overall growth of 9% in solid waste disposal, tracking partially in line with the state economy. We're actually not pleased that we've seen a 9% growth in disposal, but I'm also pleased that we've not seen more than a 9% growth in disposal, given the 32% rise in the economy during this time. And the third and fourth rows there just break that out, so you can see the trends for the municipal solid waste and the construction demolition debris. So this is the big picture that we're looking at, thinking about. And then next slide, and I'll try to tie this together here. So limited management capacity, certainly for solid waste, but we're also looking at our management capacity in other forms of management capacity, recycling, composting, things like that. So on a net basis, we have 2.7 million tons of trash going to out-of-state facilities on a net basis for disposal. That's a lot. That's almost half of the trash we dispose of goes to disposal facilities in other states on a net basis. That's not where we'd like to be. Ideally, we'd like to be much more sufficient in state if we could be. We've also seen rising trash and recycling costs. This is what's reported by our cities and towns. So this may not be fully representative of solid waste management costs across the state, but this is the data that's been reported to us. So these are per ton costs for either disposal or processing from 2021 to 2024. Pure coincidence, we've seen solid waste disposal costs on a per ton basis go up 18%. We've also seen recycling processing costs on a per ton basis go up 18%. So both of those systems, a little bit of strain, a little bit of capacity limitations, and fairly significant cost increases. And then the third point I want to make here is limited infrastructure and associated rising costs for managing these hazardous household products. These are all the products that we use in our home that are hazardous to health or the environment when disposed of, and we need to manage in special ways through special collection and management programs. And we've seen reported cost increases of those in the range of 30 to 60%. So really substantial increases for managing these hazardous household products that are borne by municipalities around the state. So these are some of the issues that we're looking at and we're thinking about in terms of the overall management picture for solid waste in the Commonwealth. And these are really the key issues that we're looking to try to address and change. So it's just a very quick overview. And, we certainly take questions later on, but we just wanted to share with you our big picture perspective of the solid waste management system. Thank you.
And the next presentation is Scott's. So,
So Scott, I'm going to come up, just for those of you who don't know, Scott Cassell is the president of Product Stewardship Institute. He's been started the organization himself back in 2000. He's reached 25 years, I believe. And he's going to just give us this big overview with all the experience he has in that field to kind of give us, for those who are not familiar with EPR, to give us some background and some context and what's happening around us in the field.
Great.
Scott?
Will you do the?
You want me to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
If you don't mind. All right. Hi, everyone. Scott Cassell, CEO and founder of the Product Stewardship Institute. So it's great to be here. I used to work on the 20th floor here where I got the brainstorm of working on extended producer responsibility, and 2 blocks down the street, I founded the organization 25 years ago. So this is going to be a 20-minute presentation of 25 years. Okay, next slide. So what is extended producer responsibility? The key question. So we start with product stewardship. Product stewardship is synonymous with producers taking responsibility for the products and the packaging that they put on the marketplace. There's 2 basic types of programs: voluntary programs and mandatory. And what we're talking about here are mandatory programs with extended producer responsibility. The definition that we came up with early on in the United States for the United States is EPR is a law that extends a producer's financial and managerial responsibility for its products and packaging beyond the manufacturing stage. That's the orange rectangle up there, manufacturing. Beyond it, upstream to product design, and downstream post-consumer to reuse, recycling, composting, and safe disposal, and including what we call now responsible end markets to make sure it's really being recycled. So this has extended very far. Next slide, please. So I used the term paradigm shift on the other slide, and this is the way to think about why this is happening. Because over 100 years ago, municipal management of trash was an innovation. People were throwing their garbage everywhere. There wasn't any organization. That came about, and that topped off when we said in the 70s, hey, we need to do recycling. Well, it started as voluntary recycling. People like myself and many of you were volunteer recyclers. But if you've done that, you realize there's a point where you come to and say, it ain't gonna work. This is good, but we need something else. That's why we moved to municipal funded and managed recycling programs. We lobbied the cities to take this on, and they did. But what we're seeing now, and for quite a while now in the United States, is that we've topped off here. We need to move to another paradigm, which is EPR, which is producer funded and managed programs with multi-stakeholder accountability. Next slide. So John did a great job with the at-home problems here, capacity and other issues, rising costs. So I'm not going to go over all of that, but just so you know, you're not alone here by any means. This is all over the United States. All the states are dealing with the same thing. Municipal recycling has stagnated. Increased municipal recycling costs. You saw that here. There's underfunded. You have fragmented municipal recycling. 351 municipalities doing their own thing, having their own educational programs, having their own recycling programs. That's and you're not even a county system working on a regional level, which is still difficult, but that's really inefficient. There's confusing recycling instructions and labels on packaging. So consumers are very confused, and it leads to contamination of the recycling stream, which lowers the value of those materials. Next slide, please, Greg. There's also these recycling markets are fluctuating, and the private sector does well with that, but governments don't budget for those vicissitudes of the changes in the markets. And so it's unstable. Low consumer confidence in recycling and huge environmental externalities. All of the recycling or the waste, or waste is an externality here. It leads to greenhouse gas emission, and virgin resource reduction, extraction. When we don't reuse or recycle, of course, we have to use energy to extract materials and make new. And then waste inequality that was already talked about here. Next slide. So why EPR? All effective EPR laws have sustainable funding, and that comes from the producers. So the municipalities don't have to get their funding all together and get it all together. You have the producers of the products and packaging provide that sustainable funding. It reduces government costs because it really replaces many of them. It gives incentive for waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and composting. Particularly on packaging, you'll see this when we get to that there's a topic eco-modulated fee. So a producer putting on the marketplace a package that has high recycling markets and high value for that material in the back, that producer using that material will have to pay less into the system than one that is putting in material that goes in the garbage or has very low recycling rate. It gives an incentive to sustainable production. And I've addressed the other two issues already. Next slide, please. So there's more collection convenience. The convenience standard that is statewide would be if you're collecting right now, your municipal trucks are going to single family, multifamily, if they're going to parks, if they're going to the schools, that's going to stay. But we're trying to get to making recycling as easy as it is to throw out your garbage. And that's really the level playing field, and then we go from there. Establish annual reporting, statewide education and outreach, performance goals, and then no free riding. And what we mean by this is you have producers right now that are voluntarily they're making packaging that is more sustainable. It's costing them a little bit more. They're getting marketing benefits, but they're stopping there. They're at a competitive disadvantage for them making that material. And what EPR does is it flips that. It gives those companies a competitive advantage through these systems because they're paying less into the system. And that's a really important point to get through, particularly with packaging. Slide.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
So one of the things I see missing from these descriptions of effective EPR laws are, it speaks to mitigating the environmental impacts, but I don't see is mitigating the impacts on public health. And presumably an effective EPR would improve health outcomes by limiting exposure to hazardous materials, improving management. So I just wonder how that sort of factors into the goals.
Absolutely. The hazardous materials, there'll be more cost for a producer that is putting in the marketplace packaging and other materials that are toxic. The eco-modulated fees have not yet gone from packaging to these other materials, but they could. And those are the things that you might talk about here over time. But certainly by managing them appropriately, household hazardous waste, we worked with Vermont, they have the first EPR law on household hazardous waste, and that is helping the public by safely managing those and having more facilities available to the public, and the producers themselves are paying for the cost of disposal, safe disposal. So thank you for bringing that up. So as I mentioned, EPR, it's not just producers, it's a network of accountability. That's why I really like this system, is because it's collectors, recyclers, retailers, municipalities, state agencies, consumers, everybody has a role in this system. Next slide. We work on over 25 different product categories over the past 25 years. Next slide. And we started here in 2000 with 8 laws on one product that was rechargeable batteries, the old ones that had mercury and cadmium. But now, and that's in one product in 7 states. Next slide. Right now, where we are is 141 EPR laws passed on 20 products. Those are industry sectors in 33 states. You can see the Northeast, it's covered a little bit up there, but the Northeast, the Great Lakes, and the West Coast, the most activity on EPR. Here's Massachusetts EPR laws, 3 of them. They're older laws, 2 of them are set to sunset. Next slide. Here's another view. You'll see where we started and a rise, and it shows no sign of abating. Next slide. So those are the laws. There's 80 EPR bills that have been introduced in the United States on 14 products in 22 states. And you can see it's smattered around the country. And now some of the so-called red states are actually introducing them. We work on all across the country in Missouri, Oklahoma, Alaska, Hawaii, all these other states. And EPR is catching on all across the country. Next slide. EPR is considered the centerpiece of the circular economy. That's from Europe, here in the United States as well. So I just want you to, to think about it. EPR is not the do-all and end-all. It's not it. It is the centerpiece. But there's complementary policies that are needed, bans in certain places, bottle bills, deposit return systems. I used to manage it here. Greg knows that well. John knows that well. Toxics in packaging, labeling law, and post-consumer recycled content. All of these are needed in order for circularity to take place. Next slide. So what is EPR? I'm going to focus on the top 2 bullets. It's when producers are funding and managing the systems. And we would call that full EPR. And examples are packaging, batteries, and electronics. But there's also certain programs where the consumer is funding and the producers are managing those programs. So taking the burden off of government. This is how this movement started, the burden on particularly local governments, financially and management wise, and moving it to the private sector. And that's paint and mattresses and a few others. Now, other terms you're going to come across are shared producer responsibility. So this comes in where the government will share some of the costs with the producers on particularly collection and processing. I can give you various examples around the country, but Minnesota, their packaging law, they were the 5th in the country. They introduced a phase program. They started with 50% of the reimbursement, the cost being reimbursed by governments 1 year. The next year was 75% cost reimbursement, and the next 90%. And we just passed a law in Maryland, or not passed the law, excuse me. It went through both chambers. It's on the governor's desk, expected to sign. That'll be the 6th one. It's very similar to that. In cost reimbursement, as I mentioned, it's really a term used with the packaging. And because the systems have been in place for so long here, the governments didn't want to really let go. They wanted to keep the same programs that they have, but get reimbursed. Next slide. All right, what's not EPR? It's basically when the producers don't have a significant role in managing those systems. And so this is where the consumers are funding the programs and government is managing those programs. And these are laws from the 80s, I think. Used oil, used tire programs, the consumer pays the retailer to manage the waste, retailer hires a collector to manage that waste. Some of the funding will go to a state agency for staffing, oversight, grants, but a lot of times it's paying for a whole lot of other things that are outside of that program. Another one is industry funded and government managed. Pesticides here in Massachusetts used to be like this. I think it still is, where it's really not covering many of the costs at all. So it's some amount of funding upfront. Next slide. There's 2 basic funding mechanisms that kind of mentioned a little bit before. Cost internalization, where the costs are being internalized by that industry sector. So we're setting up in the law, here's the goals you need to meet. You do a plan, producers do a plan, here's how they're going to do it. Go ahead, go do it. DEP oversight and enforcement responsibility. Consumer fees is where consumers are actually paying those. And you can see most are cost internalization over the fees. Next slide. There are bills in Massachusetts this year on 7 products, portable batteries, electric vehicle batteries, electronics, mattresses, paint, packaging, and an amendment to the pharmaceuticals law so that it would remove a sunset. Next slide. I throw this up here just so you see there's a lot of experience around the world. I know many of you know that, but European Union from the 90s have all these programs on packaging, batteries, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them are directives, which are EU-wide, electronics, batteries, packaging. And British Columbia, also in Canada, has really the most substantive programs, all along going back into the 90s as well. But now all the provinces, all the bigger ones now have EPR laws. Across Alberta was the last one to just join up. Next slide. Next slide. So I'm going to quickly wind up here with elements of effective EPR. These laws can be complicated, like all legislation can be complicated if you're just reading it, you don't fully understand it. So we came up with a method there whereby you can break down each of the aspects of the EPR laws into 16 boxes. And that's what these are. I don't have time to go over them, but I will go over a couple of them. Next slide. So some of the policy choices, covered materials is a term. And if we're talking about doing batteries, so batteries would be portable batteries. Now it's primary, non-rechargeable and rechargeable. Those are kind of the standard basis, or used to be about 5 years ago. Now, the next standard product is e-mobility devices, like the electric bikes, scooters and hoverboards, things like that. Then there are other medium format, larger batteries that are like the power tools. Then there's electric vehicles. Then there are battery energy storage systems that electrify the whole house. So there's batteries all across. They can fit into one category, but you can also do them phased. Covered entities is where those materials are being collected kind of free, that are part of the program, the program's covering those costs. And again, it's residential, small commercial, schools, public spaces. It's where those municipal trucks are right now. Convenience, I've already covered that. It's a very important part for equity as well as other aspects of collecting. And then there's performance goals here, which can be met by, put into statute, rule, or the plan. Stewardship plan, which I'll talk about next, is very important. Next slide. Okay. So the governance is the producer responsibility organization. That is very key. That is, the producers must be part of a producer responsibility organization and a approved stewardship plan that PRO will submit to the state oversight agency, DEP in this case. So a stewardship plan is basically implementation plan. How are you as a paint industry or packaging producers going to actually meet all the laws as they're set out? And there's often a multi-stakeholder advisory council that has come up as sort of a new innovation in packaging. It hasn't taken hold yet because governments find it a little bit, a lot of work. So it's worth it for the packaging. They haven't put it in for the others yet. And I think I've covered these other parts, so we can move on to the next slide. So I'm going to end here by saying what I have seen over the years is certain states passed their EPR laws the first time. Colorado, paint, I know it's hard to hear, paint and packaging. First year it went through and they passed those laws. Others, here in Massachusetts, there's paint for over a decade here right now. It's not necessarily due to this, but packaging and other laws, you have to think about this as a paradigm shift. You can't do everything in one bill. It's really important to have these kind of conversations, but really this is at the top. You need to get into the nitty gritty of what you mean by battery and how you collect it and why do this and what do that. You have to get into those really detailed discussions. And that's important for laws to get done, you get experience, and then they can expand over time. And you have many other states that have done this. So you have a lot of other experts out there to draw from. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. We're gonna have a discussion. I'm thinking we still have an hour and a half. It might make sense to take a quick break for folks who need one. So I'm just gonna call time out for about, let's say, 8 minutes, 11:05. So if you need a little bit of time, please take it now. I do.
the presentation of what the commission's charge is.
Yep.
It sounded like we are to recommend policies to the legislature.
Yes.
yet on the
And-
website.
Sorry.
That the rules are.
My question is that the exclusive focus, or could we come up with policies that we would recommend to the DEP to issue as regulations, or is that outside the scope?
So. My understanding, I have my lawyer over here, I believe pretty much everything we're going to recommend would require legislation. So we don't have a specific authority at present to kind of impose EPR regulations. We need statute.
I get that, and that's what made me think of it, because I understand a lot of, if not everything that Scott proposed is legislatively based. But like I said, connected back to the original description, I'm just thinking about the work overall. Are we just thinking about legislation, or can we, as we discuss these policies, recommend regulations to DEP?
I think we have, as far as the statute reads, it says we're supposed to develop, policy recommendations to the legislature, and I think that needs to be our focus. There may be ideas or items that come up, but we are in the middle of our solid waste master plan midterm review in 2025, which will have conversations on a whole host of topics, from toxics to, commercial recycling, recycling market development, reuse, all of, if it's policy, if it's programmatic regulatory elements, I think the solid waste master plan update would be the more appropriate place to try to, for this group should focus on the directive from the legislature. What are the policies we want to tell the legislature to focus on?
Right, and the other opportunities, assuming we can get the legislation passed, obviously there would be a process by which we would implement these regulations. And there's a whole public element to that, right? And there's always a question, one thing I was gonna ask Scott, it's like, you can be very, very specific in a statute, right? And that can be challenging for us, right? And so sometimes, I just was wondering your experience, the legislation actually, like how specific do they typically get? Do they just set it up? So, you're gonna draft regs that have certain elements, like what's your take on kind of how specific the legislation typically reads for these kinds of programs?
It's a great question. So the law is developed through, it's really good to keep in mind, the statute, regulations, and here in DEP or Massachusetts, regulatory, putting in regulation is very common. In other states, it may not be. And then the plan that's submitted also is the other. So I would say it's always a mix. It depends. If you're thinking of something that is kind of universally known across, the country, if you will, when it comes to solid waste and how to do it, it could be, could be post-consumer recycled content where there's more of a consensus amongst some materials in some places. But if it's, let's say, waste reduction, or it's some other element of recycling rates and rates by dates, you need to have baselines. Like that's what you'll see the difference in the discussion between what the industry is going to want, what environmental groups and government may want. So you try to get as much as you can, of course, in the statute, and then things that can't be done right then and decided on, then it goes into the regulatory arena. And from there, it can go into the plan. And the plan allows even more of the discussion than more of a strict, if you will, regulatory, set way of having discussions in the regulatory arena. So the plan itself has more of a give and take. They're little, they're formal like this, but more like this, where it's gonna be, it's formal setting, but more opportunities for interaction and discussion. So that's how it goes.
That answers your question.
Yes.
And EPR, the definition is that it's law. So I don't know
Yes,
that,
I
I know
should-
you know that, I just
yes,
wanted to
I
throw that
should-
out there.
I should have made that clear. I guess where I'm still coming from, which is only, slightly related to Scott's presentation, but directly related to the initial layout that John did of the situation in Massachusetts, it was sort of presented like, we have these millions of tons, we are running out of capacity, what are we gonna do? And yet by DEP's own regulations, more than half of those millions of tons are not supposed to be disposed of to begin with. They're banned by DEP, you know, the waste, paper, cardboard, glass, et cetera, have been banned from disposal for 30 years. And so it's just not a given that we have that amount of waste. And so I'm trying to connect the dots between that presentation and what you were saying and the potential for the work that we have here. To me, I haven't like sifted out the categories yet in which to think about it, but anyway, your presentation was excellent. Thank you for that.
So I'm just wondering, are we limiting ourselves to these 4, 5, 6 meetings? And how are we going to accomplish that?
We have not landed, we have a minimum of 4, that's not gonna be enough, right? So I think one of the things we need to determine for ourselves is how much time we're gonna need. I mean, realistically, I think we're probably gonna need to meet monthly, right? I mean, I don't see how we're gonna do this otherwise.
But if all the work is going to be done in committee like this, there's
Well, everything that's voted on, we can distribute information. So one of the things we'll do is we'll send out, there's bills. And there's a number of bills out there, we'll distribute those to the whole group, and that will help us, right? We take a look at it, maybe there's a bill that's just, we all agree, this is where we want to go. That's one, right? So there's a whole bunch of steps. Some of these, like I said, some of these are just more complex than others. Some of these are gonna take us some time. So my own sense is we probably need to set up a monthly cadence. I know the summer is tough, right? But if we can shoot for that, it's gonna go by fast. The time is April and January's gonna be like that. Right? We don't, right? We got a million different things going on. So that's my sense in terms of time.
But so for instance, if we're working on a piece of legislation, can we be sending in comments and is that ongoing or no, it has to be?
No, that's my take, my read of this is that at a minimum, we can make these recommendations for January. It doesn't say we can't make more recommendations. So my sense is if we can tackle one product, right, and we can do it by June, let's say, then we'll vote and we'll send it a recommendation. We'll be ahead of the class, right? We'll do that and then we'll move on. That's how I'd like to do it. It's kind of take them, you know.
So will there be communication between meetings? I guess really
Well,
is.
that's one of the challenges.
Okay.
It's open meeting, right? We have to be very mindful of not communicating until we have a quorum. So that's the challenge. We can certainly send out information. We're not gonna say, you should do this. It's like, take a look at this bill, right? That's fine, right? Things like that. But in terms of, we can't all get together ad hoc and not be subject to the open. So we have some constraints. But that's why I'm thinking, you know, monthly, I'm hoping that case. I welcome other stuff. If folks think that's too much, too little, I would like to hear from folks. But that's kind of where I'm thinking. Anyone have thoughts on that, timing wise?
I didn't have a thought. I was trying to follow our cues. Setting the trend. I didn't have a thought on the number or timing of
Thank you very
meetings.
much, Leo.
I had a separate question, so I don't want to.
Sure. No, I didn't get a response, so I think I'm gonna offer up monthly.
Is there a possibility of like breakout committees or subcommittees? Within the meeting, I'm sure yes, but outside, as long as it's not more than 10 people.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I served on a commission. No, I wasn't a member, but we had subcommittees. It was the housing commission, and we did have subcommittees. So I think that's something that we should explore. I'm not entirely sure how that works, just because, see, housing was different, because there's all these different categories. This is really one category, right? And so I don't think there should be a paint subcommittee. I think everyone should be here to talk about paint. I mean, we can think about that. I struggle with it. I thought about that. You know, it's like my experience with the housing was it worked pretty well. We broke it into chunks, and then our subcommittee made a recommendation to the commission, which then made its own recommendation. So we should think about whether we want to do that. I guess I'm a little bit skeptical of how that will be efficient, given the nature of our charge.
I'm thinking some components might be more complicated than
Right.
others,
Right.
like packaging.
Packaging's gonna be fine.
And that maybe that would be a place because there are different aspects to it.
And I would jump in, you know, my perception of subcommittees is a group that sort of structures the conversation,
Right.
pulls all the strands together and creates a structure for the committee or the commission as a whole to come back and deal with, rather than we're all sitting around trying to figure it out, but, so.
But, well,
that-
excuse me, as a subcommittee, you are still subject to the open meeting law.
Yes, absolutely, you have to post,
But
yeah,
I think, I have to look into this a little further, but I think like say if it's 5 on a subcommittee, I think then 3 would be your super majority, your majority there, so.
right,
I just wanna exercise caution as always,
sure.
But,
I've done,
Yeah.
I've done subcommittees
Okay.
in public bodies before, I mean, on a regular basis, good 10 years worth of it.
okay, great.
I mean, it's a school committee, but it's still under the open
So,
meetings
yeah,
law.
there's the Connolly exception.
Just as long as you're below a quorum of the committee as a whole, it should be good.
Yeah, Scott.
This might be helpful. We're facilitating the advisory board and for packaging EPR in Colorado. And their open meeting law is even more stringent than this. You can't have 2 people from the board together on a call, on an email or anything. And so what we've been doing as, the facilitator is to actually have conversations with people outside to try to clarify what their thoughts are, what they want, and bringing it into the group. So you have more opportunity here with more people, as Andrew was mentioning. But I just wanted to say it's definitely doable and, fairly standard practice in some ways so that you can get a lot done outside the meeting. So that when you come in, the thoughts are clarified, the issues are clarified, and, the focus of the discussion is better.
Great. I mean, I will be clear that a subcommittee in Massachusetts under open meeting law, you post the meeting. It's an actual open meeting. It's just with a, smaller group of the commission as a whole.
Right. So I think this is something we could talk about it now, but we could also take it up at our next meeting, come up with some proposals for how we might break out, so we don't have to be limited to these monthly meetings. Figure out what it looks like. I guess I'm still struggling with kind of just conceptually, I just feel like we have kind of these categories, like how do we subdivide that? Like, what do we do, especially early on, just, like early on, we kind of get some low hanging fruit. And then as things start to get harder, we might have to come up with a better way to kind of prop yourself. But if we start kind of, I won't say it's easy, nothing's ever easier, right? And then move our way up the chain to the really hard stuff. We might have to come up with some ways to coordinate. Facilitators is one. There was a facilitator on the housing commission and it was helpful. So I think there's different ways we can approach this, but we'll put that on the agenda for next meeting, kind of like how, what options are for different types of structures, so that we can increase our efficiency. Any other questions from Scott or
Pull
John?
up the next slide.
Go on to
One point, John, that I would try to add to that is I think that the policy recommended, there's the kind of, yes, we'd like to say, they could be a wide range, including, we need to look at this more. Or we need to look at these specific things over time, so I think.
Yeah, and I gotta feel like some of our recommendations at the end of the day are gonna be, this needs more study. Right, not everything, we're not gonna say, yeah, we got it all wrapped up.
Right.
I think some are, some have been around a long time, and I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel necessarily. I think we can really get in our own way if we just decide we're gonna be different, But some of them, some may even be first time, or there aren't a lot of precedent, right? So that's something we have to just figure out. So any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, to that point, I guess. I'd be interested to know sort of what the vision is in terms of the recommendations coming out of this commission, both in terms of complexity and impact. I mean, I see there's a kind of logical outcome here where, there are things that are easy to resolve, but limited in impact, and, something like packaging, which, is going to be the thorniest to navigate, but, I would argue would be the biggest win to get out of this commission. having something in that end product, whatever it may be, that essentially says, these are the easiest things to get done that, you could do yesterday, but also this is the thing that the legislature should prioritize because it is the most impactful in terms of improving outcomes for the colony.
I can turn that around and say, right, we'll work on that, and nothing will happen for 5 years. So, to me, I'd rather get some wins and build on them, right? And just recognize that, yeah, these will not be the most impactful wins, but they're wins, right? And you demonstrate to the public at large that this can work, and it's not as burdensome as some might make it out to be. So I think that's my perception, just kind of, work our way through, and then there's gonna be some much harder stuff we're gonna have to tackle, and as a state, but I don't wanna delay that, right? That's like the commissioner mentioned, that's how you make things go away, it's like to study them, so that's my perspective. I appreciate what you're saying, I think it would be great theoretically to deal with the hard stuff first, but I'm just concerned that we'll lose momentum.
Yeah, it's not about ordering so much to me, it's just in terms of framing, the idea of let's keep looking at this, is kind of the punting it down the road.
Right.
Let's keep looking at this because it's the biggest thing that will make the most difference,
Yeah.
is what I would hope would be sort of baked into any recommendation to continue studying something.
Absolutely, yeah.
Otherwise, the momentum to kind of act on it coming out of this commission's recommendation.
You lose the momentum. Yeah, I agree. I think we should communicate very clearly, like where we're going, what we've included, and then see what happens, going forward. Any other questions about the presentations yet?
Yeah, I agree with, the point about getting easy wins and getting something done soon, like, to me, paint is like a no-brainer, just do it already. But at the same time, if we wait, so if we focus on that first, and packaging is the most complicated issue here. If we don't start as a group discussing that until September, are we gonna have enough time to really solve that? So is there a way we can walk and chew gum at the same time and have, maybe there's a subcommittee that focuses on some of these more complex ones?
That's a great point, and I think that's part of the way to what Tracy's talking about, if we can identify the ones that don't really require something, right? Like those ones, we'll just do it as a committee, our commission, move those on, and then the hard ones, that's probably the best way to do it. Let's take the really hard ones, set up subcommittees, figure out who wants to really dive into that, and then come back to the overall commission and say, look, here's where we're at. But yeah, that way we won't spend a lot of time here saying, well, that's gonna be really hard, we'll talk about that, let's talk about that, right? Anyone else?
I want to piggyback off of what David was saying. In the spirit of starting with the end at mind, what do these recommendations look like? So is it 3 pages? Is it 10 pages? Like what type of document are we hoping to develop? And then on that document, what I would envision is some rating of impact. I think that's really important to optimistically grab the attention of those in the legislature, but also just to, maybe it's following some format similar to the EPR elements that Scott presented, but something that kind of like a format for each of these recommendations, documents for each of these product materials. So I guess I'm just struggling to see what the vision is for what those recommendations look like coming out of this committee, because if we had some type of structure that we were aiming for, then it turns into guiding each of the discussions or votes that this group would be taking to fill those boxes.
Yeah, I can't predict page count, it'll definitely be more than 3, probably more than 10, it'll probably be quite a few pages. And I think it would be by category, by product category. And we'll run down all the different requirements of the statute, or the things that we need to look at, we gotta come up with it. So the products, proposed structures for collection, processing, and financial responsibility to cover all those. Information on cost, obviously, waste reduction, packaging incentives, impacts and waste generation. So at a minimum, we have to hit all those things. And that's a lot. Right, so if we just strike all those boxes, that's gonna be a pretty lengthy document, even for something as frankly easy as paint, we still gotta go through this, right? It's gonna be a pretty robust document. It's not gonna be, yeah, we think it's gonna be like, here's what we found, here's what we've come up with, your report, a lot of pages, and it'll be like, here's our recommendations, here's what you should act on. Hopefully by then, we'll say you already acted on a couple, so we can, make a little shorter presentation on those. You've already done this, so those are good. And then on the big ones, the ones that really have, major impacts and are more challenging, I think we need to be very specific in terms of how we see it being structured. And then it's up to our friends in the legislature to figure out how to craft that, right? How to put that in the bill. And then it's, well, we're gonna come back to us, right? And then we're gonna have to come up with regs. But I think, I hope that answers your question. It's gonna be a pretty complex document. I don't see it as being very simplistic.
And so who does the work of developing that document?
I believe as chairman, I would be in charge of directing the drafting of the document, and we would all have to include it.
Okay.
I don't think I'm gonna write it, but somebody who works with me will write it, hopefully a better writer.
Okay.
Any other questions? Next one, hurdles, we've kind of been covering.
We
this.
have a
Oh, we have a
question.
question on that?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Max with Community Action Works. I'm not sure if it was said, but I think one thing what we should also include in that document, I'm sure you may have said it, but it's just, a clear plan on enforcement and accountability. And, I work closely with community members, so having places for public input and places for accountability and enforcement. And Janet brought that up, saying that, we have bans in Massachusetts, but we need to work on our enforcement. So having clear guidelines and accountability and mechanisms to make sure what we're doing is accomplished, I think definitely needs to be considered.
Thanks. All right, hurdles. Anyone have thoughts on hurdles?
Getting a bill passed through the state
Getting the
legislature.
bill passed itself, that's always a hurdle. I think I mentioned this before, I think cost is always a hurdle, right? So that's something that we need to address straight up. These are tough times, who knows where we're gonna be in 7 months, no one really knows, but, costs could keep going up for everything. So that's something that we're gonna need to address and articulate. And to me, the best way to articulate that with all we do is to explain the cost of inaction. And I think that's often absent in the dialogue. People just say, it's gonna cost me this much more. What if you don't do something? What's it gonna cost you? Both economically and, from environmentally. So I think that's part of our mission is to say, okay, we've evaluated the potential cost impacts, and these are the costs of not doing it. And I think that John's charts are pretty compelling, because we just keep going this way. Maybe the economy will tank and there'll be less growth and less waste, but that's not a great way to manage our society. So, any other hurdles? Greg, you want to mention anything? Your perspective, or?
I think once we hear from the commission, we might want to just ask the public if there's any questions.
Okay. Anyone else on hurdles? How about online? Anyone want to offer up any observations on hurdles to EPR in Massachusetts?
If you're in the public, you can raise your hand on the online and we'll open up the mic.
Kirsty Patchy from Just Zero National Zero Waste Organization. Good to see you guys. Thank you so much for everybody for doing this. Is there a consideration of adding an actual bill to the report? Because what we've seen, and I know Scott's seen this too around the country, is that everybody says they want to reduce trash, or everybody says they don't want to burn it or go to chemical recycling, but the proof is in the pudding. The actual language is where we know, where the rubber meets the road, if you will. So is there a consideration of maybe, especially considering that that Rep Day here has a fantastic EPR for packaging bill, that others have good mattress, paint, electronics, et cetera bills. Would we be adding that as an addendum maybe as part of the report?
We could potentially add the bill, or we could simply identify the bill and say that we support the passage of Representative Dave's bill. And there's some other bills out there. I think that's what I'm anticipating, really, is that we don't need to, like I said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've got a good bill. We don't need to rewrite it, because here's what we recommend. But I think that's certainly within our purview. Say, we can advance these goals by doing this.
There's a. Yeah, you have a.
Thanks. This is another comment about public participation. I applaud you for getting the website up for this commission, but it's got nothing on it yet. So if you could get posted that list of who the members are, including both who appointed them by, which piece of the legislative directed, who appointed them, and also who they are, who they represent, would be great. Also, everything that you were voting on today, like the members packet was not posted, so we can't see what the ground rules are. And that would be very helpful if you can get those posted before each meeting so we can follow along a little more efficiently. Thank you.
We'll be posting that, yeah, after the meeting, minus the guidelines that we're gonna revisit.
Right, guidelines are still being revised. We have another.
Hi, Jen Dolan with Lutron Electronics. I may have missed this and it might be in the guidance, but what, other than us standing up, giving us the opportunity to ask questions, is there an opportunity for more public participation and discussion? Because I noticed on the commission, there's only one manufacturer representative, and that's the Associated Industries of Massachusetts. So to have, you're talking about impacts of the various EPR programs and the product categories, and impact is one thing, but effective and successful kind of means you need all the different perspectives to make those a success. And I'd love to know where the opportunity is to weigh in on that.
So these meetings are the opportunity for public participation. The commission membership is set by statute, so that's why it's structured this way. But certainly feel free, to speak to your colleagues, come to the meetings, comment on what we're doing here. But that's really the opportunity. And then, also, eventually, if bills pass, there's obviously a robust public process when it comes time to actually put this into regulation.
We also have on the website a public kind of portal for questions. So you can go in there, post, what question, what category you want to talk about, and provide us public comment on that on an ongoing basis. So, and I think, just one other thing, as we talk in a few minutes about the kind of roadmap or how the possible approach, I think conceptually it was looking to try to structure in a way where manufacturers of certain categories could be present at the time that there are topics being discussed, and not necessarily, they may, someone in paint's not gonna be that concerned about mattresses. So trying to figure out a structure that we can have them, the manufacturers of the product category, present and involved in the discussion about their product.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else online? Online questions? Right, and then the last discussion topic we did have, what do you want to get out of this process? Does anyone have anything they would like to elaborate on in terms of what they would like to see come out of this process? I think we've talked a little bit about what the report would look like structurally, but if there's anything specific that folks are really interested in. Yes.
I'm very interested in gaining insight into perspectives from different stakeholder groups. I think in Massachusetts in the past that has all been whisper and hearsay and kind of not enough dialogue between different stakeholder groups. So I'm excited to see that be in a more public space and kind of different perspectives being on the record and formalized. Because certainly getting to recommendations would be much more success than we have seen thus far. But then, advocacy and efforts to get the bills passed beyond that, I think those insights gleaned from this process will be helpful in eventual efforts to get bills passed.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Already skipping ahead to the next slide, but so the product category is identified in the statute, not bond, the product category is identified in the solid waste management plan. And so one thing I think would be helpful to tie together would be some sort of overlay of this commission's recommendations in terms of how they serve the goals of the 2030 solid waste master plan. obviously, I expect there's sort of some technological limitations to modeling and projecting how much, reduction savings you're gonna get, but any ability to sort of say, these specific EPR recommendations serve those broader goals in this way, this way, this way, I think would be helpful in sort of both tying those two processes together, but also more broadly making cases to what, the waste reduction benefits of EPRs for us.
Go to the next sheet. Okay, so we've talked about these categories. Are there other products or categories that we should consider?
I think the workload is already quite ambitious between now and January. But since the question was posed, I would like to raise the category of hazardous household products, or we refer to it now as household hazardous waste, because that is a very expensive category, and it also addresses the goal of the state to reduce toxics going into our waste stream. And it's not a category that has had much conversation in Massachusetts.
Thank you. Any other categories or products folks want to think about? Where would you place that in terms of priority?
I would say it's probably as complicated as packaging. But the fact that there is a neighboring state that has been the first state to pass that, just gives some insight into, what's possible.
So that's one question. Is plastics and packaging one category, or is it plastics, comma, and packaging? So those.
One category.
It's one category.
Sorry, just on that, when you post your slides, one of the first slides had a plastics, comma, and packaging, comma. So if they're together, when you post them, you might want to edit that.
Look at the bill. Whatever we call
It was, yeah, it's meant to be one.
Depends on how you look at the Oxford comma.
I know.
All right. So talk about, so you kind of touched on this a little bit, housekeeping. So again, I'm going to suggest we make this monthly. We'll set up at the next meeting. We'll talk about subcommittees. I think that's going to be, we'll finalize the guidelines, set up subcommittees, and then I think the next meeting, what I would suggest is we talk about paint for our first product topic next meeting. So we'll send out some bill language that exists. We'll send those out for folks to look at. Sure. So, yeah, paint. So anybody, any other thoughts on our next meeting? That's kind of the big picture. So we'll do some housekeeping, get the subcommittee structure set up, finalize guidelines, and start digging into paint. We'll probably have someone, in, right? We'll have someone come in, talk to us about paint, talk to us about other programs. But then kind of really dig into that and see how much discussion we really want to have about it. Maybe next up after that's going to be mattresses. We're just going to go the same order that statute directs us to. So that's kind of my sense of how we proceed from here. Anybody else have any ideas or questions about structure?
There's actually a slide coming up that talks about which meetings cover which topics.
Yeah, I think in terms of the structure of the meetings, we were thinking, listen, we will have, there's some housekeeping things from the previous meeting, we'll address those. Then we get into particular product category. And that saves the manufacturers time to to say, this is your day, you're gonna come in. My expectation is that if we have programs in place in other states, that the industry can come and say, this is what the program is, you know, in Connecticut, New York, whatnot. They can provide their overview of what existing programs they have, if there are some, such as paint mattresses, clearly there are. Then we can have a discussion. We will send advanced materials again on this, getting at some of the cost impacts, some of the, you know, waste volume impacts that we see in Massachusetts, and trying to give you some information about that. Bill, also connection to bills that might be already existing, and other information about the particular product category. We'll have presentation made on, by the group that has the program, if there is one. There's pretty much one in all of them, maybe the only one is packaging, not, and there's no consistent electronics one. First three, Bill, you know, mattresses, paint mattresses and batteries, there are entities that are out there. Then we'd have a full discussion, take some public comment at the meeting as allowed and as time permits. Then try to take a straw poll, you know, on you know, what people's feelings are about it. You know, in the temperature check, I'll let kind of Jennifer explain that, and the hope is we're getting, you know, to some sort of policy recommendation at the end of that meeting. If not, we'll carry some of that over to the following meeting.
Yep,
Kind
so,
of covered, okay?
yeah. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah.
So with that straw policy proposal, we're gonna need to, you know, kind of queue it up for the following meeting. Because clearly, you know, we're gonna have discussion and just, you know, talk about facets of it, but then it's gonna need to be written up into some solid language. So hopefully what will happen is we've got this solid language. You know, initially we talked about having offline votes, but I think we've learned that that doesn't work because it's considered deliberation. So what I'd like for you to all do is have a chance to review that policy language, come to the meeting with your specific thoughts, edits, recommended changes. And then what you'll do is weigh in via a scale of agreement. And we'll kind of go through a couple of rounds of voting, and hopefully we don't need to spend too much time on it, because then we need to move on to the next topic. But that will also give an opportunity for the public to provide some comments as well before you make a final vote on recommendations. And then you'll socialize that draft language prior to final adoption, which happens at the end of this process. But you know, it's like the semi-final version. So the next slide shows what the scale of agreement looks like. It's effectively, instead of you're voting yes or no, you are voting somewhere on this scale. And that permits you to say, like, I like most of this language, but you know, I'm gonna vote a 2 because it's not 100% what I would go for, or I really don't agree with this, so I'm gonna vote a 4 or a 5. And here are my suggested changes. And that, you know, it helps prioritize what to talk about and how we should move forward. So, you know, we'll kind of iterate until the language is something that we're all comfortable with. It's something that we did with the Commission on Energy Infrastructure Siting and Permitting. Rolls right off the tongue. And it worked pretty well. I think it allowed for like a divergences of opinions and a lot of stuff to get fleshed out that was, you know, again, not a black and white issue.
Yeah, and the hope would be we'd come back with the proposal, policy proposal at some point. We'd take a vote. There, you know, it's always trying to reach consensus, but as the guidelines had said in our bylaws that, you know, there would be majority call, you know, vote on it, and we should move forward on a particular language.
Yeah.
But I think the process that we're gonna use kind of outlined gives a lot of opportunity to kind of move through some iterations to make sure we get close, you know, to that consensus.
Great. Wendy, you're, or Juanita, sorry.
Well, actually, this is exactly what I wanted to bring up, was just the order of operations of like, or the order of the material categories. So it was said that this was how it was laid out in the law, that what this is based on.
I think it's a combination of that and where things are at, with the hope of reaching the commissioners. And John's kind of approach of like, we'd like to get something out before January that says something positive about something. We were thinking that approaching some of the more concrete, you know, and examples out there of what's being already done in other states successfully, And being able to make the case on those would probably be a little bit easier than trying to say, let's come up with a decision on packing and packaging in a month and a half.
I agree with that approach. I would say that the order is probably not what I would think would follow the framework that you just described. Certainly paint, mattresses, there's really good, well, paint in particular. Paint is like, it's very well defined and there's like a very structured, like a good structure that is in a lot of places, that doesn't vary much. Mattresses, I would say, is a little bit more complicated, particularly in Massachusetts due to the disposal ban on mattresses. And then something that probably was not at the attention of the legislature when this was passed is that there is now much more of a unified consensus on lithium ion batteries and more broadly, all batteries or like all portable batteries. And there's a lot of conversation and momentum going into this legislative session on that material category. So I would like to see that be moved more toward the beginning, because I think that there could be more consensus there than is given credit here.
So what would your order be then? Paint, mattresses,
Batteries next.
batteries?
And then I would probably do electronics and packaging at the end.
Agreed. I think lithium ion batteries now has become the low hanging fruit. So there's enough legislation out there. Agreed.
Yeah.
Just got a question on, I guess picking up a little bit on a discussion earlier. Is the intention here, or I suppose we should discuss it, if the intention is to come out with one report or drip on these, because this order, frankly, is irrelevant to me if we're coming out with a report at the end of the commission.
We're gonna, my sense is we'll have at least 2 recommendations before we issue the final report in January. I think there's enough, maybe 3. You know, if there's enough, momentum going for some of these categories, there's no reason to wait till January. So that would be my sense. I would like to get some recommendations out prior to.
And Rep. Day, we're sensitive to the legislative calendar as well.
Rep. O'Day would get concerned if you.
Oh, sorry, Rep. Day, sorry.
We look alike.
Yeah. We are sensitive to the legislative calendar as well, so we agree with that.
So, I mean, I don't think we need to vote on this, but I think we can certainly take that into consideration. If you want, we can have a vote in terms of order.
I mean, I really want to firm this up because, we gotta get the industry people to say, yeah, can you get them here on this date? Yeah, we want you in this room,
Okay, so the proposal on the table was to go paint, mattresses, lithium ion, I forget.
Batteries, yeah, batteries, electronics.
Batteries, and then electronics, and then packaging lab.
Yes.
Right, all right. So can I get a motion to change?
Sorry,
Sorry.
if we're knowing how the best life plans of mice and men and commissions often get derailed, assuming that there's a realistic possibility that, we're putting packaging last and then also kind of bumping up against this January final report deadline. That my concern there would be that we essentially run out of time to talk about the most complex issue. So I don't know if they're to the point on the subcommittees, I would almost recommend that in the background of all of this work, maybe the commission has a dedicated focus in each of its meetings, but that there's some sort of parallel subcommittee process gathering input on packaging specifically, thinking through the fact that we can't start talking about packaging on October 29th and realistically think we're gonna come to consensus in January. So I don't know.
No,
That's
I
something to
agree.
consider.
What I'm thinking is that we set up subcommittees on plastics and packaging and electronics. I think that would make the most sense. I thought lithium ion sounds like it may not be as heavy a lift as I thought. If that's kind of moving, then I would recommend that we can vote on this next meeting. Or we vote on it now. We can set up subcommittees on plastics and packaging and electronics. So to meet that concern, I agree with that. That's not enough time to really, so we can, on a parallel track, we can keep going forward with our first 2 and then set up subcommittees on what will be the last 2, plastics and packaging and electronics.
Okay, Senator Barrett and then Janet.
Thank you very much, and thank everyone for such a careful discussion. I want to again echo the point that Representative Day raises. Are we? Is it anticipated that one cannot address these issues in a kind of comprehensive bill, but that instead we're going to have a series of discrete legislative recommendations that would be contained in a multiplicity of bills? I only ask because the typical legislative model is to try to be comprehensive, but to provide discrete provisions perhaps that deal with particular sub-problems. I guess I have no problem conceptually with our envisioning altogether separate bills dealing with each of these 5 discrete buckets, but that would be a departure from the norm, and I would enjoy hearing a little more discussion about why it's anticipated that effectively multiple bills might be generated.
I think this, to your point, Senator, I think it's kind of splitting hairs to sort of conceptualize it one way or the other. Like, I think, you know, the way the legislature likes to do everything these days is omnibuses. So like, we're almost talking about sections of, you know, certainly there could be a EPR omnibus. But my understanding of how we're approaching this is the idea that like, there would need to be specific language, whether that's a bill or a section of a larger bill, as it relates to paint, as it relates to mattresses, and that the recommendations could be all wrapped together in a package procedurally, and likely would be should they proceed through the legislature as has historically been the fashion, but that there are specific and unique concerns with these different categories that would necessitate a different statutory approach for each one.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, you know, I defer to legislature how they want to write any bills, but I mean, to me, I think 3 of these would make sense just to get moving on them pretty soon. The other ones I just think are gonna take some time. And you know, in terms of us recommending language on the harder category, I'm just skeptical we'll really we'll land that plane in time. So that's my perspective. I mean, as long as it gets in legislation, I don't, but I worry that if we get hung up on some of the tougher categories, we're just gonna see more delay. And some of these, frankly, we're long. And I would really like to see us move into, you know, the way those states are going. These other ones they're just more complicated. There aren't a lot of states so far that have taken that dive. I know there's some, they're just harder.
Thanks, that's helpful. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I guess there's no way to answer this until we dive in, but I'm confused already by what people are characterizing as low-hanging fruit, because there's policy and there's politics. And the policies may be considered low-hanging fruit in that we have models in many other cities and or states. But I mean, I just look at plastics. There are, you know, 160 some odd cities and towns that represent, I think, 2/3 of the state that already have plastic bag bans. And so that to me seems like a bill to ban plastic bags. That seems like low-hanging fruit to me, but that's a political matter, not a policy matter. So I guess when people are talking about what's a heavy lift and what's low-hanging fruit, I would distinguish between the policy, because we already have many models and we know how it will work, and so we don't have to do a lot of research or inventing. And then the politics of the commission and or the legislature and or anything else to be considered, because some of these things have been literally pending for 20 years.
Right.
And
yeah, I guess I would distinguish between bans and EPR. You know, a ban is a ban, you know, so we're here to discuss EPR. So this is, you know, having the producer follow the product. So that, and you characterize it correctly. Some already have established structures. Politics are politics. We can't get away from that. But I'm just saying, from a regulatory perspective, we look at this, I talk to my experts, I'm like, these are ones that we could just do really easily. Just from a, our perspective, we can get these done fast. The other ones are harder, we need to put in politics aside. As soon as we get it passed, they're more complex structures.
Yeah, I guess adding on to that, I would agree. I'm not an expert on how the legislature works, but to me, if this is all lumped together, it makes it less likely that something would actually pass. There's more reasons maybe to vote against plastics and packaging EPR through a cost perspective or what have you, than there is, for paint or some of these more, what we're calling low hanging fruit. So I agree with your approach of just, recommending on each category and then wrapping it up with one comprehensive report at the end. And I would ask, maybe, I don't know if Scott has any input on how other states approach this, whether it's piecemeal or an omnibus bill. What's the better approach?
Most states do separate bills. But one thing I kind of hesitated to bring up is the concept of framework legislation, which Maine has, which actually introduces like the concept of EPR to the legislature and taking some basic principles that you don't have to debate every single time an EPR bill comes through. So I was going to take that back to the shop with our policy folks and talk a little bit about it. So Maine's the only one that has done it. It's not a full framework, but it's quite often done in Canada, where it's easier than once you get the framework down, then you introduce paint and mattresses and other bills. So it takes away some of that repeated discussion. So it's easy, goes easy on the legislature, so they don't have to do the same thing over and over again.
Senator Barrett also has his hand raised, but let's go.
Oh, I just want to mention that one thing the legislature will often do is choose different effective dates for different subparts of a legislative package. So I'm not saying this is the only way we should go, because this overall discussion is good for me to hear. But you could have a framework, apparently of the sort that Maine has codified, but have different effective dates for different products, and of course other specific provisions of that kind as well. It's not that I'm making a case for a comprehensive bill, but I just wanted to point out that those kinds of variants are often found.
A distinction that has not been pointed out as far as this conversation of like low hanging fruit and combining bills is that the reason that some of these product categories are seeming to some of us that are, really in the weeds on this stuff, that there is industry support for certain product types, and in other categories, there is not kind of unified or systematic industry support. So for paint, for mattresses, and for batteries, there is now support from the producers of those materials. And there's examples in at least several states, more so for paint and now for batteries, and mattresses has 4 states. That there's examples of how stakeholders have come together around like a systematic bill approach. The industry, the producers want, from what I know, they want to see as much similarity in bills as possible, in the ones that from the industries that they are supportive of, so that they can avoid a patchwork quilt of different regulations in different states, which from an efficiency standpoint makes perfect sense. So I think that might be helpful context for this conversation, to know that from the product categories before us, paint, mattresses, and lithium-ion batteries have industry support, and more of a systematic approach than the other 2 categories.
All right, so I think we should vote on, the roadmap. And I think what's been suggested by the two commission members is, changing the order to paint, mattresses, we go after, sorry, I don't have that, you know, paint, mattresses, lithium ion batteries, plastics and packaging, and electronics. Did I get that correct?
Well, it should be electronics then.
Electronics and then plastics, sorry. So, should I say that one more time? Paint, mattresses, lithium ion batteries, electronics, plastics and packaging. Everyone agrees, so I need a.
Make a motion.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Oh, discussion, sorry, discussion. Coming back. Further discussion on this? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's our new meeting roadmap. I'm trying to think whether we should go down on the subcommittee to take it up next meeting. I think I'm just gonna suggest that we, move to set up subcommittees on plastics and packaging and electronics. We can figure out the structures. I'll need to confirm with my attorney, but figure out the structures. But I suggest that we move to set up those subcommittees. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
A second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Sorry, do we have? All opposed? Okay, so we'll set up those, we'll get the details together for our next meeting. Figure out membership, et cetera. But I think that's a good suggestion. So those are the ones that are gonna take. Yes.
Figure out membership at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think people should figure it out, but I gotta figure out how exactly all the structure is.
With the enabling statute saying, everyone's saying initial recommendations by January of 2026, do you envision going beyond that date?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't know how long we want to perpetuate this. I think that's open. I think that's an open issue. I think we could keep looking at it open. I think that at a minimum, that's what we're charging for. I don't think that means we are necessarily disbanded attribution. So that's something we could figure out as we go on. It does say the initial, it doesn't say will sunset at X date. So I'd say that there's still potential for going forward beyond that. Yes.
Public comment participation open during the subcommittee or only for these?
This is why I'm gonna need to get some legal advice. I think my colleague here says that those are still open meetings. I believe those are still subject to open meeting law, so yes, they would be subject to posting and public participation.
Great, and they'll be posted to the website
Yes.
kindly? Okay, thank you.
But that wouldn't be occurring until after our next meeting.
After our next meeting, we haven't figured out a composition of something. We will do that next week. Anybody who wants to stand up, be on the subcommittee as well. Or hear from. All right. Take up the last one. For the next meeting. All right, thank you all. I really appreciate your time. Appreciate you being here. I'm gonna need a motion to adjourn. So move. Second. Favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Weird.
Was it right?
Yeah. I have to go back and get a shot for the right meeting. Mine's gonna be.
What do you got?